Brazil. Of Portuguese, Brazil. Officially, the Federal Republic of Brazil is the largest country in South America and Latin America. The area that later became known as Brazil was inhabited by numerous tribal nations before the landing of explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral in 1500, who claimed the discovered land for the Portuguese Empire. Brazil remained a Portuguese colony until 1808, when the capital of the empire was moved from Lisbon to Rio de Janeiro. In 1815, the colony was elevated to the status of a kingdom with the establishment of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and the Algarves. Independence was achieved in 1822 with the establishment of the Empire of Brazil, a unitary state governed by a constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary system. Brazil is a regional and middle power and is also classified as a rising power. Brazil is considered a developing country with a high Human Development Index and is considered an advanced emerging market country. Brazil has the largest share of global wealth in South America and is one of the world's largest bread baskets, having been the largest producer of coffee for 150 years. Some of the earliest human remains found in the Americas, Luzia woman, were found in the area of Pedro Leopoldo, Minas Gerais, and demonstrate human habitation dating back at least 11,000 years. The earliest pottery ever found in the Western Hemisphere was excavated in the Amazon basin in Brazil, and radiocarbon dated to 8,000 years ago. The ceramics were found near Santarém and are evidence that the region hosted a complex prehistoric culture. The Marajora culture flourished on Marajo in the Amazon Delta from 400 to 1400 AD, developing sophisticated pottery, social stratification, large populations, mound building, and complex social formations such as chiefdoms. At the time of the Portuguese's arrival, an estimated 7 million indigenous people lived in what is now Brazil, mostly semi-nomadic people who subsisted on migrant hunting, fishing, gathering, and agriculture. The population consisted of several large indigenous ethnic groups, e.g. the Tupis, Guaranis, Jers, and Arawaks. The Tupi people were divided into the Tupiniquins and Tupinambas. Before the arrival of Europeans, the boundaries between these groups and their subgroups were marked by wars that stemmed from differences in culture, language, and moral beliefs. These wars also included large-scale military operations on land and sea, as well as cannibalistic rituals involving prisoners of war. While inheritance carried some weight, leadership was a status acquired over time rather than assigned in succession ceremonies and conventions. Slavery had a different meaning among indigenous groups than it did for Europeans, because it originated in a diverse socio-economic organization in which asymmetries were implemented in kinship relationships. The Portuguese colonial administration in Brazil had two objectives, which were intended to ensure the colonial order and the monopoly of the richest and largest colony in Portugal. To control and eradicate all forms of slave rebellion and resistance, such as the Quilombo of Palmares, and to encourage all movements for this suppress autonomy or independence, such as the Minas Gerais plot. Tensions between the Portuguese and Brazilians increased, and the Portuguese Cortes, guided by the new political regime introduced by the Liberal Revolution, sought to re-establish Brazil as a colony. The Brazilians refused to give in, and Prince Pedro decided to stand by their side, declaring the country's independence from Portugal on September 7, 1822. A month later, Prince Pedro was declared the first emperor of Brazil with the royal title Dom Pedro I, leading to the creation of the Brazilian Empire. The Brazilian War of Independence, which had already begun in this process, spread to the northern, northeastern regions and Cisplatina province. The last Portuguese soldiers capitulated on March 8, 1824. Portugal formally recognized Brazil's independence on August 29, 1825. The core culture of Brazil is derived from Portuguese culture due to its strong colonial ties to the Portuguese Empire. The Portuguese introduced the Portuguese language, Roman Catholicism, and colonial architectural styles, among other things. The culture has also been heavily influenced by African, indigenous, and non-Portuguese European cultures and traditions. Some aspects of Brazilian culture were influenced by the contributions of Italian, German, and other European, as well as Japanese, Jewish and Arab immigrants who arrived in large numbers in the south and southeast of Brazil in the 19th and 20th centuries. The indigenous Indians influenced the language and cuisine of Brazil, and Africans influenced language, cuisine, music, dance, and religion. The culture of Brazil has been shaped by the fusion of various indigenous cultures and the cultural fusion that occurred, particularly during the Brazilian colonial period, between indigenous communities, Portuguese colonizers, and Africans. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Brazil received significant numbers of immigrants, mainly of Portuguese, Italian and Spanish origins, who, along with smaller numbers of Germans, Austrians, Arabs, Japanese, Poles and Ukrainians, made important contributions to the formation of the regional cultures of Brazil and contributes to its current existence as a pluralistic and racially diverse society. Brazilian art has evolved since the 16th century into various styles ranging from Baroque, the dominant style in Brazil until the early 19th century, to Romanticism, Modernism, Expressionism, Cubism, Surrealism, and Abstractionism. The beginnings of Brazilian cinema date back to the medium's birth in the late 19th century, and have reached new levels of international recognition since the 1960s. In the 19th century, in Brazilian architecture, other European styles such as Neoclassicism and Neo-Gothic architecture were introduced to Brazil. This was usually mixed with Brazilian influences from their own heritage, creating a unique form of Brazilian architecture. In the 1950s, modernist architecture was introduced when Brasilia was built as the new federal capital in inland Brazil to support the development of the interior. The architect Oscar Niemeyer idealized and built government buildings, churches, and town houses in the modernist style. Brazil is not only what you see, but what you feel. Once you spend time in Brazil, you get in the right mood. Thank you for the valuable time you have taken to watch this video. If you like this video, then please subscribe to my channel.